Hello, I'm Colin Shackelford, and today I have the pleasure of the company of Dallas Buxton, who's an authority on creation and the theory of evolution, and is also an administrator of an organisation called Genesis Ordains Design. Now, to begin today's interview, we're going to hear some comments from the beginning of a speech that Dallas made just recently.
Like it or not, we live in times of danger and uncertainty. These words were spoken in 1968 by US Senator Edward Kennedy at his brother Robert's funeral. Robert Kennedy was campaigning to be US President when he was assassinated. The civil rights leader, Martin Luther King, had been assassinated just a few months earlier. America was in mourning and in turmoil. And around the same time, some will remember the horrific and brutal murders committed by Charles Manson and his drugged-up girls that shocked the world. It was also the time of American youth in rebellion. It was the beginning of public drug taking, the hallucinatory LSD. And this was the emergence of the hippie culture. Remember Woodstock? And sexual freedom was becoming predominant. The pill had arrived. And school dropouts were on the rise. And street protests and riots were rife as the country was in a war with Vietnam. Yes, it was a time of danger and uncertainty. Australia, also involved in the Vietnam War, suffered similarly, and today both nations are facing new challenges with cancel culture, wokeism, and anti-Christian tendencies. Now, I believe that the foundation of this uncertainty began in 1962, when Madeleine O'Hair went all the way to the US Supreme Court to have prayer and Christian references removed from all public schools in the US. She succeeded, and the theory of evolution stepped into the void. We are now living in the time when the youth of 1968, who were the first graduates of no Christian influence in schools, are today the parents and grandparents of our current youth who also received no Christian influence. Christians everywhere need to unite to minimise the false teaching of evolution, and at the very least have creation reinstalled in school curriculums as an alternate study. Since the time of Jesus, the church has been under steady attack. First, the Romans in the Colosseum, the Crusaders versus the Muslims, the Romanists during the Reformation, to today with the theory of evolution, wokeness, communism, and anti-Christian terrorism. Now, as we progress, I need to say that I am not a scientist, just a messenger. And this commentary is based on common sense in layman's terms and Christian influence. I will not use big words like photosynthesis and cyanobacteria to describe the evolution of oxygen, for example. Nor do we profess to agree that oxygen arrived in a process called the Great Oxidation Event that apparently occurred 3 billion years ago. How could they possibly prove that?
So, Dallas, that was very interesting and also quite controversial. So what exactly is the theory of evolution?
Well, it is loosely based on Charles Darwin's book Origin of the Species, first published in the 1850s. 700 pages of suppositions, perhapses and maybes, which had to be trimmed down to 400 pages because many of the theories had already been proved false. Abraham Lincoln must have read the book as he was quoted, "I find it much easier to believe in the words of the Bible." Now, Darwin's book sat on bookshelves gathering dust for the next 60 to 70 years, until young scientists in the 1900s could not bring themselves to believe and teach divine design and creation. From then it could be said that the theory of evolution was a gospel according to Satan, with their one and only commandment being, there is no God.
So, according to the theory of evolution then, how does it all begin?
Well, in many instances of evolutionary theory, different interpretations appear because they usually don't know themselves. Some are outlandish. They say that in the beginning there was absolutely nothing, zero, zilch, and then it exploded, boom. This became known as the Big Bang. From absolutely nothing, we now have billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars. Amazing. But no witnesses and no proof.
Oh, okay. So, does the theory have a time frame? Like, when did the Big Bang happen?
They don't know. They really don't know. Some say 5 billion years, others 15 billion years, and even 20 billion.
Okay. So we've got a vast array of galaxies and stars, billions of these things. So where does planet Earth fit in?
Well, there are quite a few suggestions. The ones we chose, quite absurd. Apparently 2 rocks came together, and as they travelled through space, they gathered more rocks and debris, a bit like a snowball rolling down a mountainside. And when the Earth had exactly reached a diameter of 12,740 kilometres, it stopped. It stopped growing. And this is very significant because any smaller or larger in size, nothing could live due to variations in gravity and weather. So we have a group of rocks. But where is the topsoil? The fertile layer of ground that covers the Earth. They say that the topsoil appears billions of years later, mostly formed by organic matter, like rotting foliage and dead grass, etc. But now we end up with a situation, a catch-22, where plants and grass need topsoil to grow, but no topsoil without the plants. So we end up with nothing. Now the Earth had also stopped 151.8 million kilometres from a sunstar. Very critical and convenient. The sun provided heat and light, but if the Earth had stopped a few percent closer to the sun, all future life would boil. And a few percent further away, everything would freeze. How lucky was that?
You're very, very, very lucky. So that all sounds sort of, it's so incredible, it's almost miraculous. What comes after that?
Well, we note that evolution has not any intelligence of intellect or intellect controlling it. But we find that the big hands of evolution reached out and put planet Earth on a tilt. This enables 4 seasons to occur. If the Earth had remained upright, there would only be 1 season. But there's more. The Earth began to orbit around the Sun. 1 orbit equals 365 days, travelling at 107,000 kilometres per hour. The result of the pull of gravity. But how does it change direction and come back on the other side of the Sun? Does gravity fluctuate? The orbit assists the tilt in the formation of the 4 seasons. And then the Earth began to spin and rotate slowly. 1 measured revolution in an exact 24-hour period, conveniently providing 12 hours of light and 12 hours of darkness. Okay. And now we find that time has arrived. Precise, permanent and exact time has formed. The Earth's spin and orbit had produced days, weeks, months, and 60 minutes per hour. And they say that all this came about by chance. How could this evolve?
Yeah, it's very precise. Okay, that's the Earth. A lot of stuff is dependent on the moon as well. How did the moon come into this?
Well, a moon arrived and stayed. They say that the moon was formed by a massive explosion or collision on Earth that sent a large chunk of Earth into space. Somehow it stopped in exactly the right distance from Earth to control gravity and ocean movement. But we have no ocean yet. Okay. And it assists in regulating Earth's spin and provides limited nighttime illumination. But just how the Earth and Moon are now perfectly circular after the collision remains a mystery. And then the Moon began to revolve around the Earth and also accompany the Earth in its orbit around the Sun. Can you see what's happened here? We have a moon that can move in two different directions at the same time. Think about this. One trajectory is its orbit around the Earth, and simultaneously its trajectory around the Sun with the Earth.
That's the way you put it. It's very complex. It's hard to think that it wasn't finely tuned.
Well, yes, so evolution cannot do this though, but God the Creator can. The scriptures say, with God all things are possible. And then we find that an atmosphere fell into place and enveloped the Earth. This atmosphere was only discovered in the 1800s. It basically consisted of 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. Now, oxygen was found to be essential to life. No oxygen, no life. But we have no life yet. And there's more. There's more. An ozone layer encircled the Earth to protect it against dangerous ultraviolet rays from the sun. Now, how did evolution know or provide any of this? Or what was the ozone layer protecting? How did it evolve?
Okay. So we have water being essential, and we have lots of water on the planet. How does evolution account for that? How did the water get here?
Okay, well, some 3.8 billion years ago, give or take a week, water appeared in rivers, lakes and seas. It supposedly came from little ice crystals from outer space. Can you imagine how long that would take? 15 million years is not enough. Consider the Pacific Ocean 12 to 15 kilometres deep in places. And then why did the ice crystals stop falling? And why didn't the crystals fall on other planets or moons?
I guess that's hard to comprehend. I guess just how much water there actually is in our oceans. The depth you talk about is astonishing. And they're also salty. So where did all salt come from?
Well, they say it drained off the land and into the sea. Wow, that's a lot of salt. Okay. But how did the salt and other minerals evolve? We don't know. Rivers and lakes are permanently on land, yet do not get salty like the ocean. And where is the salt from the Amazon River that drains fresh water 160 kilometres into the Atlantic Ocean? The water is drinkable. Ancient tribes that lived in the Amazon Delta may never have known that the ocean was salty. And the salinity of the oceans hardly vary. 1 kilometre or 2,000 kilometres from shore, similar. The middle of the Mediterranean Sea and the middle of the Pacific Ocean are similar. That is intriguing and inconceivable. And it would be discovered that water is essential to life. No water, no life.
Okay. So we have an atmosphere, and we've got oxygen, we have water, we have rocks, but nothing living at this stage, according to the theory.
Yeah, but now the story gets interesting. Overnight, and ruling a period of anything from 600 to 1,000 million years ago, grasses, weeds, bushes and trees began to appear from absolutely nothing. incredibly, 3 billion years after water appeared. And all these plants need 4 essential factors to live, grow and thrive. They need fertile soil, sunlight, oxygen and especially water. Without just one of these, they will wither and die. Genesis 2 also tells us that in many instances, the soil needs to be tilled. It needs to be nurtured. Some plants are even seasonal. In the scriptures, Matthew 6:30, Jesus says, "But God so clothes the grass of the fields, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown in the oven." We find DNA is also found in all plants. But where is the fanfare? Some amazing and scientific impossible occurrence have just happened. Life has appeared from non-life. And where are the fruit trees and vegetables? They only appear millions of years later, just 10,000 years from today, around the biblical time of man. But we are nowhere near there yet.
So Dallas, you said earlier that plants, they need the water to survive. That's fresh water. So where did the fresh water come from?
Another miracle occurs. The wind arrived. Jesus said in John 3:8, "The wind blows where it wills and you hear the sound of it, but you do not know whence it comes or whither it goes." In short, the wind is critical to Earth's existence. It scatters seeds, but more importantly, it scoops up water from rivers and seas and carries droplets into the air to form clouds. The clouds eventually become heavy with water and fall to the earth as rain, watering all plants. The wind also assists by moving the clouds to different areas. How could evolution, with no intelligence, devise such a system? In another miracle, the wind only picks up water from the ocean, it separates the salt from the water and leaves the salt behind.
Okay, so if I can summarise then, what you've said so far is really that we've ended up with a theory we've had a big bang where everything came from nothing, which is, I find, intellectually challenging. And then we have the Earth coming together as a cluster of rocks. We have a moon bursting out of that. We have this bubble with the Earth and the moon enclosed in this atmospheric bubble, hurtling around a sun star as well. That's all pretty incredible. And it's at, 107,000 kilometres an hour that it travels around the sun?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole bubble containing the Earth and moon is in constant orbit around a sun star travelling at, as you say, 107,000 kilometres an hour. And we have evolutionists telling us that all this happened by chance. Apparently everything came together out of nothing.
But that's not everything. What about animals?
Well, there are quite a few suggestions here. It seems carbon, hydrogen and water mixed with other chemicals and mingled until they eventually formed microscopic single-celled organisms that suddenly grew into complex organisms and then into individual animals.
That's a massive step. When you think about it, that's quite incredible. It's almost too impressive for totally unguided processes.
That's right. And how did the laws of physics evolve? The first animals supposedly appeared 600 million years ago. 1.5 million different species of animals, birds and insects were put together in a cesspool of bacteria. Life has again appeared from non-life. And how did they know about propagation? Every species had either male or female reproduction organs that worked together. Imagine the following. A cluster of chemicals in the cesspool of bacteria decide to be an elephant. Okay. 3 quadrillion cells later, Jumbo climbed out of the cesspool and waddled off into the sunset. How did Jumbo know what an elephant looks like? And did he give himself male or female genitalia? And how long for Jumbo to wait for another complex organism to want to be an elephant? And then find Jumbo and hopefully have opposite genitalia. Now, 1.5 million species of animals have the same problem. Evolution teaches that every animal arrived singularly. The Bible teaches that God created animals, male and female, together as adults.
I think binary reproduction is probably one of the greatest challenges for evolution. It's the ultimate question. What came first, the chicken or the egg?
Well, Christians know. The egg needs to be incubated. It needs the chicken to sit on the egg to enable it to hatch. So the chicken had to come first. Yeah. It is to be noted that it was necessary for the chicken to have contact with a rooster to produce a fertile egg. Now let's look at insects. It was an insect that accelerated my interest in creation and evolution. I was at my desk when a speck of dust landed on the paper I was reading. I was about to flick it away when it began to move. I looked closer and noticed that it had legs and delta wings tucked tightly in. It was a fraction bigger than the printed full stop on my paper. I tapped the paper and it flew off. That set me wondering. The insect had a brain. It sensed danger. It was in fear of its life. And why would this minuscule insect evolve? What was its purpose? And what would it eat? Scientists estimate that 30 quillion insects exist. A quillion is a figure with 19 zeros. To me, that is a very low figure. Because imagine the number of ants living unseen underground worldwide. Some insects live only a few hours, some 24 hours, others a few days. The housefly 6 weeks. Not much time to find partners and breed.
Those numbers are staggering. It's hard for me to actually get my head around those numbers. Insects and animals are incredibly complex from what you've said. So what about humans and their evolution or creation?
Well, to talk about the creation or evolution of humans, one needs to have an understanding of the human cell. The cell is 1/1000th of an inch or 1/40th of a millimetre in size. It's invisible to the naked eye, yet it has been described as the world's most perfect factory. It generates 1 billion chemical reactions every second. It produces amino acids, proteins and chromosomes, etc., and includes warehouses and transport systems, even its own power plant, and is the home of the cause of DNA. Incidentally, DNA contains an unfathomable depth of knowledge and is the recipe of life, and was only discovered in the 1950s, 100 years after Darwin's book. The human body comprises of 10 trillion cells, but evolution scientists tell us that humans are an offshoot of apes, and you've seen the drawings. Apes on all fours gradually rising in stages over thousands of years until eventually standing upright on 2 legs.
I've seen the pictures. There's absolutely no proof for that, though. No proof at all.
That's right. Now I want to talk about one of the intricacies of the human body. I could talk of the wonder and mystery of the human brain, or the human eye, or the heart. Instead, I will talk about the unsung miracle of the human lung system. We said earlier, without oxygen we die. Our blood is totally dependent on the supply of oxygen. So what happens? Every few seconds we breathe in the atmosphere around us and immediately exhale. Then we continually repeat this process. In that fraction of a second, tiny blood cells, sucker cells, miraculously extracts the oxygen from the other gases, absorbs it and sends it through our blood system. The oxygen being 21% of the atmosphere, the rest being waste, is exhaled. And this is the breath of life that God the Creator breathed into the nostrils of Adam and Eve. Genesis 2:7 says, "Then the Lord God formed man and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being." Breathing in oxygen is a 24/7 miracle from the womb to the moment of death. This presents questions evolution cannot answer. 1. Why does the bloodstream need oxygen to survive? How did they know? How did evolution know there was oxygen in the atmosphere? In short, the amazing lung and blood system and the need to breathe could not evolve in the few minutes the body needs it to survive. Think about that.
Yeah, and it is a few minutes. Without air, a couple of minutes and we're dead.
That's right.
And that's interesting because what you're saying, everything on the planet, the plants, the animals, human beings, we all wither and die. What does evolution present to us about that?
Well, at my age, let me just say this, I'm definitely in the withering stage.
Oh, okay.
I can remember when I started school, we were being weaned off the hieroglyphics.
Oh, right, okay. Very good.
You have heard of the Dead Sea?
Yeah.
Well, I remember when I was only sick. Hadn't died yet.
That's a terrible joke, but
and when I'm sick, my doctor refers me to an archaeologist.
Oh, right, okay. Digging deep for the truth, yeah.
And I'm of that age where some of us are so old and slow that we take an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes.
Yeah, okay.
But evolution does not recognise the existence of the spirit world, angels and demons. Okay. One only has to witness voodoo worship or research the Holocaust to see demon activity. Some evolutionists cannot even accept good and evil because it cannot be tested in a test tube and the results witnessed. And I know of the spirit world because I have experienced both sides. In my earlier years, I spent time in the wilderness, but thankfully I found my way back. Many Christians live and feel the presence of the Holy Spirit every day. And let me share a personal experience I had some years ago. Until now, I have not mentioned this to anyone except my brother, as I still don't fully understand what actually happened. But I was standing in my living room when a strange feeling came over me. It began in my chest and I could feel it move up and down my body. And as it went, I felt an enormous sense of peace, a cleansing. I felt pure and without any impediment from sin. In that moment, I instinctively burst into singing spiritual songs, a little out of character for me at the time. The difference was enormous and lasted 10 to 15 seconds before I returned to my imperfect state. On reflection, it told me that those of us who enter paradise will have endless, uncontrollable and indescribable joy and happiness with pleasures that will inspire us to sing praises. And remember, we will all have perfect voices. My brother suggested I may have experienced a spiritual visitation. It certainly was not of this world.
Certainly sounds miraculous, and you're not alone in that. There's many accounts of people throughout history who have experienced things like that as well. You talked about miracles in a recent speech that you made, so we're going to have a bit of a listen to that now. So let's hear what you said.
Evolutionists do not believe in miracles, but there are miracles that we can all witness every day. Let's look at human pregnancy. Every now and then, billions of male sperm cells appear at the mouth of a mother's womb. Some develop oars and swim into the womb in search of a female egg. And when the male cell finds a female egg, they attach, and pregnancy instantly begins. The gender, the DNA, and inherited characteristics of the mother are determined at that very moment of conception. The male cell instantly doubles and multiplies as the baby begins to develop, and that is the first miracle. The next miracle comes after 10 to 12 days in the formation of a completely new organ inside the womb, the placenta. This organ will provide oxygen, nutrients and hormones to the baby through the umbilical cord throughout the pregnancy. After 4 weeks, the developing baby is the size of a grain of rice, and the neural tubes, that is basically the brain and the spinal cord, have formed. The cells are producing at a rapid rate, forming the various body systems, and the baby is now known as an embryo. The placenta continues its work, and at 5 to 6 weeks, the tiny baby's heart begins to beat. Bumpita, bumpita, bumpita. And the finger of God is on every baby in every womb. At week 9, the embryo is now 2 to 3 centimetres. The mouth and the tongue and the eyes have formed. The embryo begins to move about in the womb. And weeks 11 to 12, the embryo is now known as a fetus and is almost 3 centimetres. And all the baby's organs have now formed, and blood cells are developing. The hands and feet are stubs, but are developing fingers and toes. Weeks 14 to 15, the fetus is now 8 centimetres. Some teeth have formed, and the tiny heart that will beat continuously for the next 80 odd years continues to develop. The eyelids are forming, and the baby now has fully formed vocal cords. At week 20 to 24, the fetus is now 22 centimetres. Its ears are formed and are fully functional. Genitals have formed. The lung system has formed. Now, weeks 28 to 40, the baby is growing rapidly and is fine-tuning. And by another miracle, it moves its head in position and its body into position, ready for birth. 9 months, not 9 million years. In Psalms 139, verse 13, King David, around the year 900 BC, wrote, "For thou didst form my inward parts, thou didst knit me together in my mother's womb." And that is exactly what we have been talking about. But how did he know? There were no X-ray machines at that time, not even a hospital. And then there is the breast milk that changes in strength and content to suit the needs of a growing baby as it develops into a child. Yet another miracle.
Well, Dallas, that's incredible information about pregnancy, about birth. Quite miraculous. I'm a father myself, so that process is just astonishing for me. Do we see similar miraculous things in the animal world?
Yes, Colin, we do, dozens and dozens. I am considering another speech on animals alone, but in this instance I will mention 2. The Alaskan plover, a bird a little bigger than a pigeon, gorges itself on seeds and berries in the lead up to winter. The bird needs to put on weight that provides energy and strength to endure their journey south for the winter migration. They migrate from Alaska to Hawaii, a distance of 4,900 kilometres, and they fly continually for over 48 hours, over ocean all the way. Research tells us that the birds put on 10 ounces of fat. Each ounce of fat enables them to fly approximately 400 kilometres. So you can calculate they are likely to fall short of their destination. But very few do. And how they do this? First, they fly in a V formation with the head bird flying to the rear after a time in order to rest from facing the breeze. They all take a turn, and they also fly at different altitudes, seeking the least wind resistance or finding a tailwind. The whole process raises questions that evolution cannot answer. First, how did the birds know of Hawaii? It's just a speck in the ocean. And how do they navigate so precisely? And how did they know to gorge food to build energy? And how did they know to fly in a V formation and at different altitudes? And how did they know that Hawaii had a warmer climate? The answers lie in the information provided by the God-given DNA. And then there's the story of the pregnant reef shark. When she is ready to give birth to 5 or 6 pups, she swims to the mangroves near shore. As each pup is born into the ocean, they instantly dart for cover into the mangroves. The mother leaves them to their own resources. They do not nurture their young. And how did the mother and the pups know they needed protection?
It's astonishing. Actually, those sorts of things fascinate me because it's where did that information come from? Now, in a recent speech, you actually have talked about the concept that evolution actually is impossible or has been proven false. So we're going to have a listen to that now as well. So let's hear your views on that.
In Montana, dinosaur bones have been found to contain tissue, meaning they are recent and certainly not 65 million years of age that evolutionists say. And in several places around the world, human footprints have been found together with dinosaur footprints. Some of you have heard of the squadron of planes that was caught in a blizzard and had to crash land in the snow in Greenland during World War II. How embarrassed years later were the scientists that drilled deep boreholes in an ice sheet and claimed the ice was millions of years old. Little did they know that at a depth of 85 metres below where they were drilling, the lost squadron was found in reasonable condition. And after a large hole was melted in the ice, one of the planes was dismantled and raised and is on display in Houston, Texas. Now, evolution also says that man appeared some 190,000 years ago, yet fruit, trees and vegetables only appeared 10,000 years ago. How could mankind exist without fruit and vegetables for 180,000 years? Impossible. And how could water and rain fall on a desert-like earth for 3.5 billion years before the so-called first signs of life, grasses and plants, appear? Now today we have the resident atheists Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and their ilk criticising the miracles of God, the creation, the virgin birth and the promise of eternal life, etc. But these devoted anti-Christians cannot, and I challenge them to satisfactorily and honestly explain how evolution works. How did evolution itself evolve? Where is all the proof? And how did evolution orchestrate the Big Bang from absolutely nothing? Or please explain the massive depth of information and the workings of DNA. Tell us why every human's facial appearance is different, even twins. And we all have different levels of wisdom, happiness, sorrow, our personalities and intelligence. Even our ears are different. And the Chinese must have known, as their 8,000 terracotta soldiers buried 2,300 years ago all have different faces and features. And please, tell us how sickness and disease evolved, or how zebra stripes, leopard spots, giraffe and tiger stripes, all different, never two the same. And tell us why evolution is uneven. It's inconsistent and selective. Consider 3,000 to 4,000 years BC. The Egyptians lived in grandeur, building huge temples, pyramids and statues. They also had a form of writing. Yet 600 kilometres down the road, the people had nothing and were living in grass huts with earth floors. Now, fire is essential to life. Tell us how fire evolved. We know it comes from lightning, but tell us how the flame itself evolved. And tell us how the hair on our head grows, as do our eyebrows, but our eyelids do not. Tell us how archaeologists find 8,000-year-old pottery and artefacts 6 feet underground, the ruins of Troy 50 feet down, and the foundations of Solomon's temple 40 feet down. Why do we find dinosaur bones from 65 million years ago on the surface? And tell us why we still have dinosaurs today. We have crocodiles, the monitor lizard, the Komodo dragon, and even our own goanna. Tell us why our fingerprints and DNA are all different. And what of the snowflake? Every snowflake has a different, complex, beautiful, kaleidoscope, psychedelic type pattern. How does that evolve? And together with the snowflake, tell us how the intricate and complex crop circles appear overnight. We mentioned earlier that the moon can travel in 2 directions simultaneously. Well, so can planet Earth and every living creature. The Earth in its 24-hour spin and its continual orbit around the sun. How could that possibly be? Let's look at this and look at this more closely. How do planet Earth's orbits evolve? They can't and they don't. An orbit cannot evolve. So what actually happens? I'll explain it this way. Imagine you go and stand outside and stand still in the same spot for 24 hours. Do not move. What will happen? You will probably see a sunrise and a sunset, and in between you will see 12 hours of daytime, followed by 12 hours of night. This occurs because of Earth's rotation of a complete revolution in a 24 one-day period. This occurs 365 days of the year. And you are standing in the same spot. You have not moved. But in reality, the Earth has moved beneath your feet and carried you 46,200 kilometres in its orbit in 24 hours. And you felt nothing. You did not even notice it. But that is only half the story. In the same 24-hour period, you have moved 2.5 million. And I repeat that, 2.5 million kilometres in the Earth's orbit around the Sun at 107,000 kilometres per hour. In other words, and you have not felt that either. Science tells us that's what happens, and even the astronauts in the space station tell us because they can see it happening. So what does that tell us? It tells us that mankind and every living creature and planet Earth can move in two directions at once and at great speed. And yet we are created bodies that don't even feel the movement or the speed of the orbit. Incredible. And you have not moved from your spot. Now, God gave us the orbits. He gave us a 24 daily orbit so that we would have night and day. And then he gave us the orbit around the sun so that we would have 4 seasons. So the Creator had to develop mankind and every living creature to be able to move at speeds to accommodate the orbits. Wow. And how could the human cell evolve with its DNA possibly evolve? Evolutionists say it is a matter of speculation, and these scientists say it is likely the cell appeared 3.8 billion years ago. How could they not possibly know that? But note the language. Likely, maybe, speculation. These are the words Charles Darwin used over 150 years ago. And they just don't know. And what of the sunflower? Its seeds form in elaborate mathematical patterns, and the flower follows the direction of the sun at all times during Earth's rotation. And during the night, the flower moves into a position facing east, and in expectation awaits the sunrise. Explain to us how doctors and surgeons are amazed as some of their patients who are destined for death suddenly and miraculously rehabilitate. And how do you reconcile the many cases of near-death experiences and the tales they tell on their return? And tell us why the intermediate fossils between species that Charles Darwin's theory predicted and expected are non-existent. No such fossils have ever been found. And tell us how morality evolved and gravity. You know what it is, but you don't know how it evolved. And what about love? You know about love has 3 different levels or 4 different levels. There's many levels of love. The level you have for your spouse is different to the level you have for your parents and your siblings. The level you have for your dog, the level of love for your neighbour, they're all different. How can love evolve? Now, interestingly, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 tells us that there will be a system called the lie, and a great delusion will sweep over the people, and they will believe the lie and reject the truth. I suggest that the delusion is the theory of evolution. Mathematical scientists declare that the odds of evolution are 1 to the power of 250,000 noughts. And that is a figure with 125,000 noughts, zeros. Science has declared that any event over 1 with 50 zeros is impossible. Evolution is teaching a theory that is impossible. It would be easier for a blind golfer to play a round of golf and score 18 holes in one. But the scripture says it best. A fool says in his heart, there is no God.
Well, Dallas, it's astonishing that a theory that's so full of holes has become so dominant in our education system, in the media, in everything that we do. It's almost like we really need to have this changed in our school system with Christian values back into our school systems. Is that likely to be an option?
Well, absolutely. But where is America? It has been world leader for over 100 years, yet is not at the Battle of Armageddon with China, Russia and other relevant countries. Is it because California has finally disintegrated and disappeared into the Pacific Ocean? Yellowstone is no more. Our children and God's children have been taught a fallacy for 60 years. Time to stop.
Dallas, I want to really thank you for bringing this to our attention and sharing the information that you've discovered with everyone here. And I'm just wondering, there's a lot to take in, and I know you've got more things in line. So I know you've got something about the miracles of the animal world. Yeah. What's happening next from Dallas?
Well, we have a planned schedule. The procedure is to gain the support of governors in individual USA states. It must start in America because the rest of the world will follow. But much hinges on organising volunteers and our depth of capital. And anyone who wants to help, our contact details are shown. And we acknowledge that this may take quite a few years.
Well, I admire your perseverance, and I want to thank you again for your time with this interview, and I wish you all the best in furthering this very important information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.